So, as Steve mentioned, this presentation comes out of a graduate student and postdoc summer institute last summer at the ACS headquarters in Washington, D.C. So we talked about the journal article, The Future. So this is a summary of our recommendations. And our approach was to look at pain points. So in other words, when you read a journal article, where are your pain points? Where are you frustrated? Where do you want more information? Where do you want things organized differently? It was a fairly easy exercise because we sat down and just said, all right, where are you frustrated? Let's pick those points and start to brainstorm. So we came up with 6 suggestions, and I'll run through these. So methods database, having to do with the experiments in a particular journal article. User-friendly figures, so figures are sometimes confusing. Can we make them a little more approachable? Graphical abstracts and alternative abstracts in addition to graphical abstracts. We talked a lot about those in the Summer Institute. Definitions, so you're reading a journal article and you don't understand a word. How easy is it to find a definition? Citation management tools for keeping track of references. And then custom settings. What if we could take our ideal approach to an article and transport that to every article that we read? In other words, take our custom settings with us. So I'll go through each of these. So pain point number 1. I have to go way back in time, and I still can't find the methods. So this gets to this exercise that everybody's been through. So you read an article from 2010, 2011, and it refers you back to something in 1984 for the method, and you look at that, you finally find that paper from 1984, and that refers you back to that out-of-print book from 1937 that you know is no longer the exact method. But nevertheless, it's tough to know exactly how the experiment was done in this most recent article. So what we proposed was a methods database, where methods are actually filed at the time the paper is published in a central database. So it might look something like this. I just dummied up a paper here from our lab at UCLA. Say there's a table in it, and that table might look something like this. So it would have a brief synopsis of the results. So we found this enzyme is active, and how did we do it? Well, we did it by pulse radiolysis. And then if we clicked on that ACS 201 number over there, up would pop from this database the exact protocol used in this particular experiment. And so the idea is, our proposal would be these methods are peer-reviewed, and they're submitted at the same time the journal is submitted. And they're submitted to a central database, and they're cataloged, and they're numbered. And so it's a little more work the first time, but of course if you use that same method next time, then you just refer back to that method that you already submitted to the database. That would be the idea. You know, there are lots, peer-reviewed I mentioned, and submitted at the same time the paper is published. There are lots of protocol method type databases out there. This is one from Nature that some people may use, but it's not peer reviewed or extensively edited, and things, as I understand, are voluntarily submitted here. So it's not that every paper has a method submitted along with it, so it's not necessarily definitive. One of the things we liked about this methods database idea was it allowed searching by method. So if I have an enzyme that's active and I found it by pulse radiolysis, and I want to know every other experimenter who used pulse radiolysis to look at activity of this particular enzyme, I can search by method and get back to all the papers that use that method. So you can go both directions, which would really be nice. I was doing that recently, and I really wanted to see everybody else who had titrated cobalt into my enzyme, and I know it's been done, and it was hard to find those papers. And so this way, you could start at the method and go backwards. So that's our idea. A quick digression on the centralized database idea. In our summer symposium, this idea got a lot of traction, especially not only around methods, but also around a chemical structure database. So you'd have some central database into which all chemical structures were deposited with some kind of universal language that cut across different platforms. So ChemDraw could interpret it, as could Word and PowerPoint and everything else. And the synthetic chemists in the room were particularly interested in this idea, and they talked about the frustration of ChemDraw not translating and that sort of thing. So a centralized database with a universal format was something that got a lot of traction, and a strong recommendation from our group. Pain point number 2, get me out of here. This came from this particular figure. So this is from biochemistry, or this is from a biochemistry journal. I don't have the reference up here, I'm sorry. But I put this up on the screen at our summer institute, and the P chemist in the room said, when I see a figure like that, my first thought is, get me out of here. Too confusing. So we talked a lot about figures, and is there a way to make them more approachable? And we thought, who does figures really well? Well, the New York Times has great figures. So I actually went back for 30 years to see if the New York Times had ever published a Western blot and how they did it. Well, they haven't, as far as I can tell. But they do things like this. A nice simple figure, colorful, fun to look at. Not technical, but nevertheless, there's a long ways between this and this. Between the typical technical figure and something like this, it's more approachable. So we thought, well, could you make that Western blot a little more approachable? So on the left, over here, is the original Western blot, and we broke it out into 3 steps. And this is just brainstorming. This may not be anywhere close to an end product, but the idea would be to make it a little more approachable. So you might take this and break it out into 3 steps, saying, well, first I verified by Western blot that the lysates contain these proteins of interest, okay, and these 3 proteins. Step 2, I immunoprecipitated those using these antibodies to these 3 proteins. Step 3, I found by Western blot using antibodies to superoxide dismutase 1 in this case, that it co-precipitated with this protein of interest. So that's all contained here, and the trained eye can see that right away. But for people who aren't as trained, it's a bit of a tough go. This takes more space. One of our ideas is if you have a methods database, your methods section is fairly brief because your methods are contained over in that methods database. You free up some space to maybe blow out your figures to a little greater extent. So that was our second recommendation. Third recommendation, third pain point. Facing a long abstract, my brain locks. And that gets to this 65% of people who are visual learners, who see a long textual abstract and they think, oh, how am I going to get through that? Now, I presented this information to the ACS editors meeting, and the editor of the Journal of Chemical Education came up afterwards and said, this pretty much has been disproven. That it's not this clear cut, that there's a difference between visual, auditory, and tactile learners. So take that with a grain of salt. But be that as it may, there were a lot of people who are much more attracted to this type of graphic abstract. I love this myself. When I see this, my brain lights up, and I'm intrigued, and I'm drawn in, and I want to interpret what's going on here, and versus reading a long textual abstract. And that's just my style. So I prefer this graphic abstract, and as you know, that this has already been implemented a lot of places. I actually even like browsing with a graphical abstract. So this is from the ACS iPad app, and there's an iPhone app as well, and I imagine there's Android and other platforms at this point. Sarah's shaking her head yes. So I have this on my iPad, and I'll actually browse using these chemical abstracts, or these graphic abstracts. So I love to browse looking at the pictures, basically. And I'll tell you what, I do this at the end of the day when I'm tired, and I don't want to read a lot, but I want some more science at the end of the day. I'll get out the iPad, pull up this ACS app, and I'll browse by graphical abstracts. So I love this, and in our group, it got a lot of traction in our group, this idea. Now, other types of abstracts also got a lot of traction. You guys may have seen something like this, taglines like this. So this is about a stepped platinum surface, and the tagline is "step on it." So sometimes they're kind of humorous. They draw the reader in. It's a nice alternative to a dry abstract. Some abstracts like this one are bite-sized. We looked around and we pulled up this article and said, "Where's the rest of the abstract?" Well, this is it. It's a short little abstract. So that's an alternative. Another alternative is the conspectus-like abstract. If you're familiar with the Accounts of Chemical Research, this ACS journal, this conspectus-type abstract is longer. It tends to pose questions and be a little more lay reader friendly, give a little more background, and a lot of people like this too. So again, there are a lot of alternatives, obviously, when it comes to abstract. The final one that we talked about is a clinical type abstract. So my MD friend at UCLA told me doctors, clinicians never read journal articles anymore because it takes way too long. So abstracts in a lot of clinical journals have gone to this type of format where basically everything is summarized right up front. It's not just the basic findings, but it's what methods did we use, the design setting, etc., so that it answers that question that often comes to my mind when I read an abstract. The first thing I want to know is, how'd they do it? What experiments did they do, and how did they get to this conclusion? And in this clinical type abstract, that's already answered for those people who aren't going to read the whole article. So what we talked about then, what we sort of came to, the conclusion to which we came in our group was that we like alternatives when it comes to abstracts. We like having the graphical abstract available, potentially bite-sized, potentially the conspectus idea or clinical-like, that these are all alternatives. And I'll talk at the end about the possibility of setting up your own profile so that when you pull up an article, you'll pull up your abstract of choice. Pain point number 4. Searching for definitions takes too much time. So this gets to that pain point of reading through a journal article and you get to a word you don't understand. And so you may have to click off to another page, or you click off to Google and it takes you to Wikipedia and you find your definition. But it takes too much time. So there are alternatives out there already, and we like these a lot. And we gave these a real strong thumbs up in our Summer Institute. And one of them is, this is from Cell. This is their journal article of the future. And if you get into one of their articles that's formatted as this journal article of the future, you'll see that things are underlined, words are underlined. And if I don't remember if you click on these or mouse over them, but one or the other, you come up with a definition. So here, hippocampus was clicked, and you get this definition of what the hippocampus is. You get some other tabs here that have some additional content. But the idea is you don't have to go away to another page. You mouse over it, the definition comes up, and then you continue reading, hopefully somewhat seamlessly. So what we envisioned was something along those lines. So say we're reading along. I'm reading online. This is the web page. I'm reading this text. And over here I have customization tools, and I can check those. So I could check that I want to see definitions. And if I've done that, words are going to be underlined. So in this case, intersystem crossing, or there'll be a lot of things underlined. And if I mouse over intersystem crossing, it's going to come up with a little definition here. And then hopefully I mouse away and that goes away. So these definitions are embedded right there in the text to pop up as needed and make it a lot easier to get to definitions. Similarly, if I clicked on figures over here and I moused over figures, like figure 2A, up would pop the figure. So again, the worst thing for me reading online is having to scroll down to find the figure. And often, and some journals, of course, do this already, but we love this idea. Mouse over it, figure pops up. Maybe if you mouse over the figure, it gets even bigger. I mean, those decisions can be made. But the idea is it's a seamless transition. You don't have to click away, find a definition, or find a figure, and come back. So that's pain point number 4. Pain point number 5. There are no automated complete citation management tools. So this gets to, how do I collect all those references and keep track of what's going on? There are a lot of tools out there. Mendeley is one I like. Is there, anybody in this room use Mendeley by any chance? One? One person, okay. All right, so it hasn't quite caught on. I think it's a pretty good resource, though I have yet to harness all the tools. This is the desktop for Mendeley. The nice thing about it is you can drag a PDF right onto this desktop, and it populates all the metadata for you in the article. So it is, in most recent PDFs, the metadata is all embedded. And so it'll pull in the title, the journal, the authors, the year, etc. So it's all right there, and it's pretty easy. And there's some nice tools for organizing. These are all your articles. Say you can organize them into different topics. And I haven't used all the tools. I don't know about being able to export groups for publication purposes and that sort of thing. But exporting and those types of things were part of what we envisioned as this complete citation management package. So as part of solving this pain point number 5. And we envisioned something like an iTunes interface. So you've got all your articles somehow cataloged here. You can browse through the first page or the graphic abstract, just like you'd browse through in cover flow mode in iTunes. You'd have tools over here to filter. You could bookmark things. You could export. Hopefully you can drag and drop PDFs like you do with Mendeley. Those type of tools we'd like to see. So that was our recommendation. Anyway, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly here. In pain point number 6, which is I want the system to save my settings. So this gets to, okay, I've gone to one publisher, and I've gone to the ACS, and for all the ACS journals, I've set up my profile, and I know how I want to see an article. It would be nice if we could carry that across platforms, across publishers too, so that basically my profile would go with me. And there are people working on that sort of idea. I'm sure that librarians in the room could tell us more about that. But this is just the recommendation that came out of our group, was to be able to customize how we want to read an article. So we envisioned a page, an article would look something like this. This is our dummied up page. And if I start down here, lower right, with abstracts, there are different types of abstracts that we might, from which we might choose. So I might click on, I want to see the graphic abstract in this particular article. But if and then another choice would be like my own profile. Do I want to skim? Do I want a classic look at an article? Do I want an in-depth look? Those are choices that I might make, either on the fly as I see one article, or maybe in advance saved as part of my profile. And this is where I might save that in the customization feature. So I'd personalize how I want to see this, save it, and then every time an article came up, then my own profile, my own way of looking at an article would automatically be presented. Now, some other things we liked, collapsible content. So maybe I want to have a nice clean interface, a nice clean screen when I'm reading the article, so I'll collapse some of these sections. We like this tabular organization, so maybe I just want the abstract or the full text like I might see now. Figures and tables possibly separate. A tab for references would be nice if I can just click right to that reference. The other possibility with references is that as you mouse over a reference, the reference pops up, so you don't have to go to the end of the article. But either way, in this format, we've got the tab. Supplementary material, we like the idea of embedding that in the online view, at least, of the article, so that you don't have to click over to the publisher and find the supplemental material. Now, last couple things, bookmarks. We'd love to be able to bookmark things. And once we bookmark it, what we wanted to do is to be able to share things. So, how many people are familiar with Stumbleupon? Most people, do people use Stumbleupon, that website that you can stumble upon topics of interest? So if I'm interested in bird watching or winemaking, I can set up my profile on the Stumbleupon website, and then I'll hit a button that says Stumble, and it brings up web pages that have to do with winemaking that other people have bookmarked and tagged as winemaking pages, and they found interesting. So it's a way for me to stumble upon stuff that other people have found interesting. So the idea here was in the chemistry world, someone else, like I'd want to read everything Sue Ebert reads. So Sue would bookmark stuff, and then in my profile, I would say, I want to see what Sue reads. And so if I hit this distract me button, or AKA serendipity button, or kind of a stumble upon button, it would bring up articles for me to explore that Sue's written or read, or other people that I may have set up in my profile, or other keywords, other topics that I want to hear about. So the idea is it replaces that paper journal, right? So you go to the lunchroom and there's that paper journal, and you can flip through it and you find articles you might not necessarily have read, okay? So in the online world, obviously, we don't get that. We don't as often get that opportunity, so this would be a way to do that. And so, I could not only bookmark them, but I could say, hey, I like or dislike this, and again, it would set that up in my profile, and then people with whom I shared my profile would get the advantage of those articles that I particularly like. So we like that stumble upon idea as well. So and then finally, this is the ACS Network page. We have an ACS Network that we set up for the Summer Institute last summer, where we communicate back and forth with each other about particular topics. I don't know how many people have used this, but it's a nice tool, and you can kind of friend people on here and get them in your network and discuss particular topics. And the idea is embedded into your ACS logon would be your profile. So when you log on, your ACS profile will be set up And again, all those 37, 38 ACS journals, and when you read an article from one of those journals, your profile would be embedded and you'd get the graphic abstract and you'd get mouse over definitions or whatever it is you set up in your profile that you wanted to see. So it would be embedded in the ACS, in your ACS logon. So, just summarizing then, methods database, and other centralized databases as well. User-friendly figures, graphical abstracts, and other alternatives. These are all kind of streamlining the consumption of information, making it a little more approachable. And then definition search, citation management tools, and custom settings. And those are, in a sense, using technology to put information at hand. So we have the ability to embed that stuff right into the article, the definitions, etc. So using that technology to put information more readily at hand. So that was our brainstorming from the summer, and I guess now we're going to do some more brainstorming. First, I just wanted to thank, on behalf of the 6 grad students and postdocs from around the country that participated in the Summer Institute, we want to thank all of our advisors, and special thanks to all these folks that helped out with the Summer Institute, and Dave Martinson, too, who was our host from the ACS and made it just a great week. So it was a lot of fun brainstorming, and I think now we're going to do a little more brainstorming here, open up the floor a little bit, and talk about some of these things ourselves. So thank you very much.